Hi, everyone, and welcome to Discovery's Chats with Changemakers. I'm your host, Tiffany, and I'm an 11th grader in Texas. I participated in Discovery's Future City competition when I was in middle school. Each month, I welcome a different guest from the engineering community. Today, I'm chatting with Allie Ryland. Allie's a water engineer and a member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Allie, welcome. We're so excited for you to join us today.
Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to ask Allie a few questions to get to know a little more about her. You can ask questions too by typing in your question in the Q&A box below, and we'll save time to answer as many as we can. So Allie, I understand that you're a water engineer and the director of technology at Caminos de Agua in Mexico. Can you tell us more about this organization and your role there?
Yeah, sure. So Caminos de Agua is a nonprofit organization. We're based here in central Mexico, and we partner with communities and grassroots organizations, so groups of people who have organized themselves to improve their water situation. And we work on a few different things. We work on awareness, we do trainings, we do community projects, which include rainwater harvesting systems, amongst other projects. And me as the director of technology, that means that I oversee the technology side of the organization. And that includes two main groups. So there's the water monitoring group, which is exploring kind of what is the current situation, both in terms of contamination and also water scarcity, so quantity of water. And then I also oversee or work with the research and development group. So that group, what we do is we look at technologies that are out there, solutions, and we think about how they could possibly be useful in our context. And then if there's not a solution out there that's useful for us, we'll work on inventing a new one.
Awesome. So how did you get started working on this project in Mexico?
Yeah, I started working with Caminos de Agua about 2.5 years ago, and actually found the organization online. I just liked the work. Yeah, I like the work that the organization was doing in general, and I saw they were looking to hire someone on the technology side. And previously I was working at a civil engineering company in Portland, Oregon, and I was working designing wastewater treatment plants, pipeline projects, drainage from roadways, that sort of thing. And then I also had worked with a group of women coffee farmers on some irrigation projects and similar things in Ecuador. And so I was looking for a new job, and that's how I found Caminos de Agua and ended up here working on this work.
That's great that you're able to meet such a basic human need to bring clean water to people that don't have access to it.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Oh, sorry. It's interesting work for sure. And we like to make sure that we're always collaborating with people and working together to try to come up with good solutions.
So what made you decide to choose this career path?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what you say too. Water is such a essential part of life, and it's also such a powerful force. When I was in college and university, I was also working as a dam safety engineer. So working with really huge quantities of water, and I saw how powerful water really was. And then also working on filtration, small scale level, and seeing how basic it really was to humans as well. So that was what motivated me to focus on water. And in general, I wanted to be an engineer because I wanted a tangible skill. I wanted something that I could offer my community and be trained in that way. And so I was inspired to pursue engineering.
Yeah, it's awesome that you have a background with so many different projects with water, like you mentioned dams, and here doing clean drinking water, and that's really cool. So in the region you work in, what percentage of the population struggles with access to clean drinking water?
Yeah, so our region here in central Mexico, we outline the work that we do in the watershed, it's called. So all the water that drains from the highest of the mountains and the hills down through the streams and into the lakes, all in that kind of basin, that region is our watershed. And that's the work that that's where we work. In Spanish, it's called a cuenca, and it's the Cuenca Alto Rio Laja. And in that area in general, in our area, a lot of people are reliant on groundwater to cook and drink, as with a lot of different areas around the world. And specifically in our area, there's around 680,000 people that are reliant on groundwater and are exposed to scarcity and contamination issues here. And if we back up a little, thinking globally too, there's like 2.2 billion people, like a quarter of the population, who lack access to clean drinking water. So this is an issue that a lot of people are facing, and also something that probably a lot of us are facing and have seen impacts and will continue to see impacts in the future.
I had no idea that it was on such a big scale, how many people are struggling with this issue.
Yeah, it really is a big scale, and it's emerging as we continue through the future, because we're starting to see other contaminants, other issues because of human impact as well as the climate changes, and we're going to be seeing lots of different complications. So it's always good to be aware of what's going on in our own regions too.
Yeah. So what kind of drinking water contaminants are most common and cause the most issues?
Yeah, there's a lot of different contaminants in drinking and cooking water. So a lot of people will think immediately bacteria or pathogens. And those are something that cause acute issues. So fast issues. So you might drink a glass of water that has bacteria in it, and the next day you might wake up with a stomach issue. That might have happened to many of us. But then we can also think of other types of contaminants that have longer term effects. So in our area specifically, we're seeing an increase of arsenic and fluoride contamination over the limits that are acceptable. And those create issues after drinking them for 10, 20 years. You can see fluoride causes like dental fluorosis. And so it's like the white or brown spots on your teeth. And it also has an effect on your bone, all your other bones. And arsenic will cause issues with your kidneys, different cancers. So those are some of the things that we're facing here in this region. But there's also different contamination happening in other regions. And that can happen due to runoff from fields or chemicals or pesticides, lots of different things that can get into our water source and cause us health impacts.
So can you tell the water is contaminated just by looking at it?
Sometimes, and sometimes you can't. We like to do a little test here when we're doing trainings, and we have different bottles, and we'll put different types of contamination or different kind of ingredients in there. So one might have dirt in it, and so that you can see, right? And that might indicate you have bacteria. Also, you might see something with, like cow poop in it or something like that. That seems really obvious. But then some contaminants are hard to see. They're clear. They don't have any smell. They don't have any taste. And that's really what we're facing too when we think about arsenic contamination or fluoride and other chemicals.
I'm sure that probably makes it a lot more dangerous if you can't really tell just by looking at it.
Yeah. And it's something that you really have to kind of have a little bit of background or be seeing the health impacts to know what's in your water. And that's kind of why we like to create awareness here at Caminos de Agua. We can kind of bring up those topics and make sure people are aware of the source of some of that contamination.
So we have our first audience question. Peter wants to know what different types of water filtration systems there are.
Yeah, there are lots of different water filtration systems, and it really depends on what you're trying to remove. So that's the first step is doing some testing, seeing what contamination is in your water. There are lots of things that are very common that'll treat bacteria or pathogens. We can think about UV light for disinfection. We could think about chemicals like chlorine, also ceramic filters. That's one we work with a lot that remove bacteria and pathogens. And then when you're thinking about other contaminants that are really small and hard to remove, there are wider arrays of treatment options as well. One of the commercial ones we see here is called reverse osmosis. So it's like little tubes, pretty much, membranes, and it passes through the water, and it pretty much only lets through the water molecules, and it filters out a lot of the other contaminants. What's hard about a treatment technology like that is that it wastes a lot of water. So a lot of the contaminants will come out in a more concentrated volume in water, and they'll just flow out as waste. And it also requires electricity. So you kind of have pros and cons, good things and bad things in all of your different treatment technologies, and it depends on what you're trying to remove, but there are a lot of different options out there.
It's interesting that there's so many different ways that you can filter water. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So what other challenges do you run into besides contaminants when working on clean drinking water projects in communities?
Yeah, there are a lot of different things that come into play too when we're working on different projects. So one of the more basic ones is, you're looking at water contamination, but also lack of water. So a lot of rural areas, their wells are going dry. The water table is actually going down in our area. So the groundwater that's in the soil, it's going down in about 2 to 3 meters per year. So that's, taller than me. It's a really huge amount. And a lot of that is being used for big industry, to water fields, that sort of thing. So there's a lack of water in general. Wells collapse. Some communities only get water every couple of days or once a week. So that's a big issue. And then when we're thinking about working on projects with the community, it's really a collaborative project. So we'll come together with them and see what issues are going on, what help we can give, what ideas they have. But there's also a lot of organization that goes into that. There's a lot of logistics. So it's not just, hey, we're going to come in and plop down a technology, right? So there's a lot of social side that goes into it as well, as far as organization, understanding, and planning. And so that's one of the most important things when working on water projects is how are you actually going to make something work? The solution could be great at treating the contaminants or at providing access to more water, but if no one is going to use it, then why are you even doing it? So it's always important to consider the usefulness of a project and the technology.
So what questions are important to ask yourself when you're working in another country?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are important to ask yourselves. First, it's important to just think how your effect is having there working in another country. Being a foreigner, maybe you don't understand the context, or maybe you are coming in with different ideas, and that can be really helpful, but it can also create harm in some ways. So it's really important to be critical of your role there, and also just making sure to listen first, understanding what's going on, asking questions, thinking about how your effect is there, and also bringing things back, learning and bringing things back to other communities, and being kind of critical about what's going on really close, starting close to where you are.
Okay, so what does a typical day of work look like for you?
Yeah, typical day of my work. It's pretty varied. That's one of the things that I really like about the work that I do with Caminos. So we're a small group and we work on a lot of different projects. Some days I'm in the lab working on testing water. Some days I'm working with a group of community members, a group of women that are organized, motivated to change the water situation in their region. Sometimes we're building different treatment technologies or having team meetings, raising money, fundraising, all of those things go into my job. And so every day it's pretty different, but it keeps it exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool that you have such a nice variety in your job. You're not just in one place the whole time.
Yeah, that's what I like about this job compared to others I've had.
So we have another audience question. Colleen wants to know what you studied in college.
I studied civil engineering. That's what my degree.
Awesome. In what ways do you think that your job encourages you to be a change maker?
Yeah, I think my job really encourages me to learn about different water issues and spread awareness. I think all of us have a lot to do as far as understanding what's going on with the water in our region, what contaminants might be in it, where does it come from, what is it like? And so hopefully my job is inspiring me and also other people to take a critical look at what's going on related to water and the water that they're drinking in their region.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of an impact you make on these communities.
Yeah, it's good to take a critical look at the situation that we're all in and be able to take it back home.
So what is one piece of advice that you would give kids who think they might want to be engineers when they grow up?
I would say to learn from other engineers, have conversations, see if you can follow people around, shadow people. And then because really there are so many different types of engineers and so many different types of engineering, as you're seeing on all of these chats, I'm sure, Tiffany. So if something isn't exactly what you like, try another type of engineering. And if you do want to go into engineering, I would just recommend thinking about the impact that you have and what you can do in your region and how you can create positive change.
Yeah, that's great advice. So what's your favorite thing about your career as an engineer?
My favorite thing. I really like that it's hands-on, that it's something that I'm constantly learning, improving, and it's really challenging. I can be very creative and kind of think about new things every day when you're working on complex issues.
Yeah. So what other types of engineers do you work with?
I work with a lot of different types of engineers. We're a small team on our tech team, but we have a lot of technical advisors too. We work with mechanical engineers, we work with electrical engineers, chemical engineers, a lot on water treatment processes. We do some manufacturing, so we work with process engineers, industrial engineers, the whole lot.
That's really cool that you get to work with people who have a variety of different interests.
Yeah, and it's so important. You really can't create much change by yourself. We always have to work in teams, and that's how we have the most impact in general.
Yeah. So we have another audience question. Jordan wants to know how you clean the water.
How we clean the water. Yeah, so one of the things that we're focused on here, or the contaminants that we're really focused on, are arsenic and fluoride. And right now we're working on a groundwater treatment system alongside a community nearby. And that treatment system works with an adsorption media. I should have brought an example, but pretty much it's a little granular media. It kind of looks like coffee. And you put it in a big column and you pass water through it. And what it does is pretty much, well, it attracts the contaminants, so they stick to the sides of the media, the granular media, and then the water comes out without that contaminant, so without arsenic or without fluoride. And that's some of the technology that we're using specifically, but there are lots of other ways that you can also clean water, and it just depends on what might be appropriate in your situation.
Yeah. So we have another audience question. Where have you traveled to besides Mexico? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I love to travel. That's one of my favorite things. I have been to a lot of countries. I studied when I was in college and university in Italy, so I explored around there. all around Europe. I also have been to Asia a little bit. I really liked Thailand. I went to Singapore. I was living in Ecuador and Zambia previously. But I think, yeah, probably my favorite would be Thailand at this point. It was just really beautiful, and the culture is so different from what I was used to in the US.
That's awesome. So we have another audience question. Kamori wants to know if your job was hard when you first started.
Yeah, I think all jobs are hard when you first start. It's kind of that idea, you get there and you don't know where things are and you don't know what your responsibilities are. Also starting this job, I had to learn a lot of new things. Before I was working on water treatment, but not specifically for drinking water, more wastewater. So the water that comes from our houses, from our toilets. But I had to learn a lot of new background working on drinking water and a lot of chemistry. I hadn't been working so directly with as much chemistry. There's a lot of things that you have to learn when you start a new job in general. So it requires a lot of patience and a lot of persistence.
Yeah. Jen wants to know if it's expensive to build tools to clean the water.
It can be expensive and it can not be expensive. That's a really great question to ask, because that's one of our main goals here at Caminos, is that we're working on technologies and creating technologies that are affordable and accessible. So if you have a treatment technology that costs you $1,000 and that's more than you make in an entire month, that's not really going to be super useful. But the technology that we like to create is something that's really accessible, things that you can go and buy at the hardware store down the street. And it is very low cost, and that makes it able to be used in many different contexts. So it's definitely possible to create low cost technology.
That's interesting that you've mentioned a lot of different trade-offs you've had to make based on the community and the technology, and how many factors play into all these decisions you've had to make.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, you have to consider the context whenever you're working on a different projects, and it's just crucial to be able to understand all of that and what might make something appropriate or what might make something kind of not as useful based on context.
Okay, one more question. Who's your role model and why?
Who's my role model? Oh man. I've had a lot of people who have influenced me over my life. As an engineer, I had my mom's friend was a civil engineer, and she was the one who inspired me to try it out. She said how much impact civil engineers can have. As a really little kid, I always looked up to my cousin because she was the cooler older cousin, and she was always really accepting, really nice, and really fun. So there's been a lot of strong women who have influenced me over my life.
Yeah. So, what do you do when you're not at work? What are your hobbies and interests?
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, I really like to travel. With COVID, that's been kind of hard to do, but that's something I normally really like to do. I really love gardening. I really like plants. I have tons of plants in my house. And I also like spending time with my friends, my husband, my pets, all of that, relaxing and exploring San Miguel and nearby places as well.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. So we have our last question. It's an audience question. How often do you test the water you clean?
Yeah, that depends on a lot of different things. So we test when we're working on developing a technology, we're testing it a lot more often. So some of these systems that are removing arsenic and fluoride, there are periods where we're testing them every day or every week. There are bigger tests that you can do that include more contaminants. And those are things that might be required by government regulations, or things that you're just interested in knowing how they're behaving over time, that you might test every year. So we have a small lab here in our office, so we can test some things here, but others we have to send out to an external lab where they have big equipment and very expensive tests. And those things we might do a little less often. So there's a huge variety, but it ranges from every day to once a year, depending on the contaminant.
Well, I believe that's all the questions we have time for today. Thank you, Allie, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tiffany.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Please join us again on Thursday, December 2nd for our next Chats with Changemakers, when we will be joined by Zoraida Martinez, a member of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. See you next time.